I'm getting close. The doors will soon open to the Patients Getting Paid membership community, where you'll learn how to find and create work opportunities that better accommodate your health. I'll be welcoming in founding members who, in exchange for helping me shape the community and courses, will get in at the lowest rate the membership will ever be. As content is added, the price will increase, but as long as you are a member in constant and good standing, you'll pay that same founding member rate that you do when I first open the doors. The doors won't remain open either, by the way. Time will be limited to get in as a founding member. Get on the waiting list right now to get more information and an invitation when the doors open. Sign up at FUMSnow.com/patients getting paid. Welcome to the FUMS Now podcast show, where you'll gain information, inspiration, and motivation for living your best life with multiple sclerosis. Find us online at FUMSnow.com. I'm your host, Kathy Reagan Young. Today's guest is Daniel Lynch, the founder of Medical Bill Gurus. That's a company whose tagline is redefining medical billing to move healthcare forward. That's a pretty big claim, which is why I wanted to learn more about him and his company and how they could help the FUMS community with our medical bills. So let's go see what he has to tell us. Hi, Daniel. Thanks so much for being here today.
Hey, Kathy. Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate you being here. Okay, if you would please tell us about yourself and your company and what your inspiration was for starting this company.
Yeah, so I'm originally a structural engineer by education and trade, but I kind of found myself always trying to solve problems that were bigger than what I could do in a cubicle, to be honest. And growing up, my family faced chronic illness, and we had issue with medical bills, just like so many other families in America. And so when my dad unfortunately passed away at 25, I quit my engineering job and kind of just jumped off the ledge of being an entrepreneur and found myself, trying to help people who were in a similar situation. And thus Medical Bill Gurus was born. I'm passionate about trying to find ways to help people who have medical bills, who are in a certain predicament with their healthcare treatment, and actually find solutions more than dwell on the problem, and find ways to help them financially recover, get things billed out to the insurance, and if anything, be their advocate and their voice for people who have no one to speak for them. And it's something I'm passionate about. And so right now I travel around the country, Mexico. I'm getting ready to go to Europe and Asia and actually meet different medical providers, clinics, support groups, and most of all patients, and look them in the eye and try to find ways to help them in their time of need, whether they're in Germany getting hyperthermia treatment or if they're down the street at, a hospital in Denver where I am right now. I'm passionate about trying to help patients and, build a brand about, remembering people what it's like to be chronically ill in America.
Yeah, that's really cool. We need more Daniels in this world. Really, I mean, we need help from, as you well know, every direction. And certainly in terms of the healthcare system here in the U.S., we get swallowed pretty quickly. It doesn't take long to be in trouble money-wise, especially when you've got a chronic disease, as you well know. So appreciate you jumping in and helping. I found it really interesting. Your site says that 8 out of 10 medical bills have errors. And I can totally believe that because, man, if I got paid for all the time I use calling and emailing providers and especially insurance companies, I would be filthy stinking rich. So what are the most common mistakes that we should be looking for?
Well, so the reality of when you look at how medical coding is done in America right now is that a lot of billers and, different entities that are doing the financial glue of what I call it, of, the actual backbone of connecting medical providers, insurance companies, and patients, the coding is done where there's so many errors. But the reality is most errors are not caught because it just goes towards your in-network deductible, your out-of-network deductible, et cetera. But if you actually took the microscope out and looked at some of the things, we actually find out sometimes patients get balance billed, or they get unnecessary medical bills because maybe the insurance company kicks it out, or they don't like the diagnosis code, the treatment code. So a lot of times patients will get medical bills. I'll even say that this is my personal history too. And all of a sudden they're like, well, I went to the doctor for this, and the medical biller took a certain code for a certain procedure that maybe wasn't the right one, a diagnosis code, let's use for instance. And because of that, the patient got a bill. And so we're programmed to think, oh, well, I just get a bill, I pay it sometimes, right? But I always like to tell people, it's like, hey, maybe you should investigate a little bit. A common issue is people go to a hospital and they go to the ER, they get a very large bill, and they're like, well, it was grossly overpriced. And the reality is that it probably was grossly overpriced. But because no matter what, when you go to the hospital, you're going to have to pay your in-network deductible anyways. There's no way around that reality with how expensive healthcare is.
Right.
They said Camille Harris at the Democratic debate a couple months ago, she said it perfect. She said, when you look through those doors at the ER, those sliding doors as they open, that's a $5,000 to $10,000 bill right there. There's no way around it, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's unfortunately turned into that no matter how we even try to address the errors with those codes and those bills, that patients are still going to have to pay that financial burden no matter what.
Right.
And so we're here to help guide patients and let them know, hey, maybe it was overpriced, but there's really no way around getting around that bill and give patients realistic solutions. But going back to your question, a lot of patients pay bills that maybe they shouldn't be paying. And so we try to be there to help them, especially if they go to an out-of-network medical provider. They really have no idea how to navigate the system. And so when they get balanced bill on that front, it's a significant bill. And unfortunately, most patients just don't know how to go about even dealing with it whatsoever.
Yeah, and so they just pay it. You just brought up about out of network too, and this is something I have just recently learned in the last couple of years. It never would have occurred to me that I had to ask if everything was in network. And by everything, I mean, quick example, I had a mammogram done a couple years ago, and I, made sure that they were in my network and everything would be covered. And by the way, that is supposed to be free anyway. It's preventative, but don't even get me started on that. Yeah. But I got a bill that I had to fight for 1.5 years because they sent it out to be read by a radiologist that was out of network. And that's so freaking maddening. I mean, why? You're really vulnerable when you're at a doctor, whether it's emergent or not. And for them, I mean, it seems like it should be common sense. They have already likely made, if you're just going in for, a scheduled appointment or something, they've damn sure made sure that your insurance is going to cover them. They know what network it is. So for them to send it out to someone potentially, it's just so irresponsible, and it pisses me off. And I'm sorry for standing up on this soapbox, but that makes me so mad when they do that.
No, it's almost like a poaching tactic, to be honest.
Yes,
I mean,
that's how it feels.
Yeah. I mean, the reality here is when we, I'll give you an example. I had a knee surgery a couple years ago in Texas, and I went to an in-network hospital. Well, then I got billed from an anesthesiologist I didn't even know I ever had, nurses, all out of network. And so I went to them, and I'm a pretty confident guy. And I said, here's the deal, guys. Here's a piece of legislation that says in Texas that you can't balance bill me for out-of-network providers when the primary facility is in network, and they all went away. But again, just going back to what I said before, some people will just pay the bill.
Right. Well,
so they try,
How many people would have known about that piece of legislation in Texas?
Well,
Not a lot.
That's why I'm on a mission to try to educate people as much as I can. And so, in some states, there's no legislation, but in Texas and Arizona, I know those two, they do have that piece of legislation. And it's around the country. And so I always say to people, when you get a bill, do the research or reach out to us. Let's have a conversation, but it's a broken system. And so these doctors, some of them, unfortunately, will prey on those situations where you go get an MRI, you do some imaging, and it should be free because you're in network. And all of a sudden you get a bill and you're like, hey, well, if the bill is maybe $30, $60, not the end of the world, right? But you're talking a couple $100 or something. You kidding me?
Right.
And again, this is what's wrong. And, just going, playing devil's advocate on the provider side, okay? Because, it's always, this healthcare has got two sides, okay? It's got the patient side and the provider side. A lot of these providers are actually taken advantage of by the insurance company, in my opinion, because what maybe happened to that radiologist is maybe the insurance company wouldn't credential him in network. Mm-hmm. And so he has to bill out a network, and he has to grasp for any dollar he can. Mm-hmm. And because I do medical billing for both patients and providers, so I see both sides of the coin. I'm very empathetic to patients, but, from a business perspective, I look at the reality of healthcare as a business, right? Mm-hmm. Dollars have to be spent. Doctors have bills, staff have bills, there's overhead, right? And so what ends up happening is that some of these providers are not contracted in network, and maybe they can't get contracts, they can't do whatever. and then they rely, unfortunately, on some of those practices to get paid, because they'll be doing work and the insurance company won't reimburse them at a fair rate for it.
Yeah.
And so, the reality is that the patient gets the burden, and it ultimately comes down to what's wrong with our healthcare system is that we always pass the buck to the patient,
Right.
and the patients can't afford that. But that's what's coming to a head with our healthcare system, and we can get to this later in the conversation. But that's why when we have the next recession and the fourth industrial revolution, where AI and machine, I'm a big technology guy. I'm a self-taught coder and developer, and so when we get to that point, you're going to see a lot of providers shifting away to be out in the network and actually only taking cash for treatment.
Yeah, I'm seeing that already. I really am seeing a shift to that for sure.
And and if we want to talk about Medicare for all, that's only going to make the situation 100 times worse.
Wow.
The reality is that healthcare needs to be run like a business. We need more competition. We need more people to be able to get skin in the game. But unfortunately, until we figure that out, patients are going to be left with the bill. And that's one of the reasons that, bankruptcy for medical bills is one of the top reasons that people have to file bankruptcy, because the bills are so astronomical that when you do get chronically ill, if you don't have the right coverage and you waited to have that come to God moment with your insurance and realize that no matter what, you're going to be 10, 20,000 in the hole before you even realize it. It's a stomach sinking feeling that so many people are facing on a daily basis.
Yep, it is. This is resonating with me so much. Obviously, I have MS, chronic disease. It's ongoing, very expensive meds, lots of, visits to the doc and whatnot. And my husband was recently diagnosed with cancer. We've got a big surgery coming up tomorrow, and I'm getting, the bills are starting to trickle in from the last surgery, which is when they found it. And I'm like, we haven't even gotten to the major surgery yet. It's just, like you said, it's like this sinking feeling. I mean, you don't have a choice. You've got to do these things, but it's, can be threatening to your family, to your financial stability. It's just ridiculous.
I mean, you're talking about life-changing situations.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're in a vulnerable spot with cancer too, because just playing devil's advocate on that front, I deal with cancer patients on a daily basis, and a lot of them are left with, a lot of scenarios of, well, do I do chemotherapy, radiation? Do I try alternative? Do I try everything? And I always, and so I almost see the future of cancer treatment being this, what was called CAM, a combination of conventional alternative medicine, right? Finding, focus more on outcomes than just throwing darts at things to see what sticks. So I wish you the best of luck with your husband's treatment, though. I mean, I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. It's a great prognosis, and we've got great docs. We're feeling really good about that. But you're in this position financially because you have no idea going in what you're coming out with. I mean, you don't go purchase anything else with being so blind and having no clue what it's going to cost you. But, you got to do it. So we'll see. We shall see. So if we do find mistakes, should we, I guess we should go to, well, let me ask you, should we go to the provider? Should we go to the insurance company? If it's something blatant and we're like, hey, we didn't even, I didn't even have that.
Well, I think it's always good to ask questions. Just be realistic, though, too, is that, if you're getting the microscope out, and you're trying to be like, hey, I went to the hospital. I always give the example where I had someone email me yesterday. Hey, Daniel, I went to the hospital with a broken toe, and they grossly overbilled my insurance for $14,000. Here's the reality, okay? They probably did grossly overprice your insurance, okay? But no matter what, your total bill out the door was like $3,500, $4,000. That's your in-network deductible. I mean, we could fight it and find errors, but the reality is you go into the ER for something is not going to be less than your in-network deductible.
No, I get right. No, and I get that. But 9 times out of 10, we're not going to an ER. We're going to, we're getting MRIs, we're getting infusions, we're going to visit our doctor. So when we find errors, what's the first line? Do we go to the insurance company? Do we go to the doctor's office?
I would go to the entity that is billing you, which is typically the provider, and say that I don't believe that this is correct. Can you please review it? And it's just because what ultimately needs to happen is that they need to update their billing to bill out the insurance and not put you in accounts receivable to invoice you.
Right.
And so, if anything, that will keep it from them sending to you to collections. Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, and a lot of times, the most common things are maybe like, let's say, for an example, like a hormone test, like a blood work, right? So I had
Mhm.
it one time where they were trying to measure my testosterone, right? And
Mhm.
they had billed it out with a different diagnosis code than what the insurance would actually cover. And I said, well, here's the deal. Like, I'm just doing my annual physical. Like, I don't know what code it needs to be, but I got $700 bill from LabCorp, right? And
Yeah.
they're like, oh, well, we just need to have you go ahead and just redo, the diagnosis code. And when they update the diagnosis code, then it went away and we're good to go.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Okay. So whoever is billing you, start there. That's
Yeah,
great
yeah.
advice. I mean, obviously, you've worked with lots of folks with MS, and it's chronic and often progressive disease that requires lots of doctor's visits, MRIs, infusions, hospital stays, really expensive medications, and on and on and on. So, how can your company help us
Yeah.
with all of those things?
So what we do at Medical Bill Gurus is that, depending on what the patient's pursuing for treatments, we
Mm-hmm.
can help navigate the financial side of what they're trying to do. So, if they get a large medical bill for something, we can review it and give them guidance. We can, let them know what type of insurance they should have if they're trying to go out of network. And so the reality, though, of where I really come in, where I work with a lot of MS patients is, like I mentioned earlier, the future of medicine is cash based. It's concierge medicine. So when
Mm-hmm.
you have a chronic illness and people have the financial means, I have people who spend anywhere on average between $20 and $100,000 on treatment at cash based medical providers that take out the microscope and they go beyond the layer of conventional medicine. Because, in all honesty, a lot of the MS patients I work with, they said, you know what, Daniel, I'm sick of hearing that I need this, this, and this when they only talk to me for 15 minutes because that's all the insurance will pay for. So a lot of people want to go to a doctor who's going to spend 3 hours with them, do a
Mm-hmm.
PET scan of their brain, look at the lesions, do IV therapy based off of really in detailed blood work and look at their myotoxicity levels, maybe even testing for Lyme disease. And Lyme disease and MS go hand in hand, depending on who you talk with. A lot of people have been told they have MS and they actually have Lyme disease. And so this is the world I live in a lot with Medical Bill Gurus is people who are trying to find new therapies, new treatments, whether it be stem cells, exosomes, low dose immunotherapy for cancer, hyperthermia, and find ways to help them financially bill that out to the insurance and recover financially so they're not going completely out of pocket if they do choose the cash based route. And that type of medicine is growing by the day. My business, we get probably 20 phone calls a day from people who are looking for alternative integrative medicine solutions and billing their insurance.
Well, and I guess this goes along with you. You were telling me earlier that you like to say you bill the unbillable. So everything that you just detailed, sort of the complementary or alternative types of treatments, I certainly wouldn't think that my insurance would cover any of that. But you're saying that you can try to find a way to get it covered. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. And so for something that may be at face value, not covered by the insurance, as long as you're under the supervision of a treating medical doctor,
Mm-hmm.
a naturopathic doctor, a doctor of osteopathic medicines that's a licensed medical professional in the United States of America in that state, we can bill for a facility fee, we can bill for auxiliary services. If you're doing IVs, we can bill for certain components of that. We may not be able to bill every dollar you spend, but considering most people realize that they're not going to get anything back anyways,
Right.
every dollar does count. And so, depending on their insurance coverage, we've had great results and epic failures, but that's why I do everything on a contingency basis. But, the main thing that we bill out a lot is IVs. And so, I'm not sure if you're familiar with a lot of IV therapy with like nutritional IVs, glutathione, phosphocholine, basically different ways to detox your body, rebuild your immune system. Like that's a lot of what a lot of the different clinics I work with do.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in the case of MS patients, there's a lot of those different IVs, especially I know we talked about stem cells. Stem cells are
Mm-hmm.
quite the buzzword right now.
Right.
So we work with a couple clinics and try to build that out. In the case of stem cells, for instance, we can't necessarily bill out stem cells. We can only bill out the auxiliary services around them that make up a bulk of the cost
Mm-hmm.
associated with that treatment.
Okay, and one of the things that staying on that track of the stem cell, because as I was explaining to you, most people who are wanting to do any kind of stem cell therapy or transplant leave the country. And I know that one of the things that your website mentions that your company does is medical tourism.
Yep.
So people are having to incur great cost traveling to get these things done. So is that something that you're talking about that you could get
Yeah.
reimbursement for?
Yeah, I was just in Mexico 3 times in the last 3 weeks already. So I go to Mexico quite a bit, but quite the emerging medical tourism market in Tijuana, Puerto Vallarta, Cancun.
Yeah.
Um, and so, when patients do go there, they need to have the necessary coverage. So that's where we come in with medical bill gurus on the front end, is letting them know if they have elective international coverage to begin with. And if they do have that coverage, then we can go after and try to bill out the billable aspects of treatment of things that maybe they can't necessarily get in the United States. And so I work with a lot of patients who go to Mexico, Germany, Switzerland, Thailand. We have clients in over 15 countries, our clinics that refer patients to us. And so, as our healthcare system collapses and implodes on itself day by day, more people are seeing international as a viable option for their health treatments.
Yeah. But so what I hear you saying is come to your company, Medical Bill Gurus, first,
Yeah.
and you can help explain, walk people through what they need to put in place before they go. And then once they come back and start getting those bills, you can help with that as well. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. And the
Okay.
reality is, if they're doing medical tourism, they're going to have to pay cash up front.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah. So most of these clinics, especially internationally, they're not going to balance bill your insurance, or they're not going to invoice you. They're
Right.
going to require a wire transfer, deposit, and payment in full before you leave the clinic. Okay.
Gotcha.
And so what we do, and what, why a lot of clinics partner with us on the front end, is because we go through a patient's insurance policy, look at their coverage, their benefits, and let them know if they're going to be able to have a chance to get anything back. The sad part of what it's like to be chronically ill in America is most patients don't have the mindset, or they have brain fog. I mean, if you're chronically ill and you're going to be doing these treatments, you're not in the right mindset to
Right.
be dealing with specifics like that.
You're very vulnerable.
Yes. And so
Yeah.
we help people understand their coverage. And the saddest part is, so many people think that when they're in a certain situation, that the healthcare system, their insurance company, is going to have empathy. And they don't have empathy. They are a business,
Yeah.
and when you go out and network, it's an uphill battle, and there is no Hail Mary that's going to be thrown to you in the end zone. So many people think, oh, I'll just go there and figure it out. No, you need to have a game plan day one before you even leave before
Right.
you even send a wire transfer. Is
Yeah.
your insurance viable? Yes or no. If not, the reality is don't expect to get that money back. I've had patients, and I hate saying this, but they go to clinics, cash-based clinics, and they spend their life savings, and then they call me and say, Daniel, if I don't get this money back, I'm going to be homeless. Only for me to tell them that they didn't have the right coverage to even get in the batter's box, and there's a 0% chance they're getting anything back. And that keeps me up
Gosh.
at night, and that's why I'm on a mission to educate people. And when I was building this business, and still right now, I travel around the country meeting with patients at Starbucks to review their policies and benefits, and educate them, because the average person, let's say in the instance of someone who gets cancer, or MS or chronic illness, they don't even know what their deductible is, or what the difference between in network and out of network is, until they have to
Mhm.
start jumping through all these hoops, and they go
It's
through
too
this very
late.
grueling mental strain financially of being able to afford everything so quickly, and the bills don't stop once you jump in.
Truth. That is true. So I was very pleased to see that you offer all of these services risk-free with no fee unless there's, a successful outcome for your patient advocacy services. And then it's 20% of whatever is recovered. Is that right?
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay.
So
Really
the
no
way that,
risk.
yeah, yeah, and and I tell everybody, I basically do a ton of pro bono consulting on the front end, educating people, and I personally, it's my mission that I'll never invoice someone unless they win. And
I
if
like
we don't,
that.
we either win together, we lose together, or all fall on the sword every time as a business owner, and
Mhm.
absorb the overhead and loss as a business for doing the work, because we didn't win.
Right.
And that's the reality is, when if I take on 100 people, probably 20-30% of them, I'm not going to win them. I
Mhm.
mean, I know that's just the reality. And when you go to international, it's even higher. And so
Mhm.
we're trying to navigate the system, but it's imploding on itself by the day.
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
it's only getting
definitely
worse.
preaching to the choir on that one.
Yeah.
We know that. So, walk me through the process. You offer a free case evaluation. So, at what point should we reach out to you, and what do we need to have ready for you, and at what point, will we know if you can help us with
Yeah.
whatever issues we're having?
So there's really two scenarios here of how I help, all right? So let's use the traditional, you went to an in-network or out-of-network provider that takes insurance, quote unquote,
Mhm.
and you get a large medical bill.
Mhm.
I always tell people, don't reach out to me because you feel like your insurance is being overly charged by the provider. Wait until you get an actual invoice from that provider
Yeah.
and then look at what that amount is, right? Realistically, if you go to a hospital or you do something and the bills are less than 3 to 5 thousand, we're probably not going to be able to help, right? I mean, just
Mhm.
the honest truth. If you're going to
Mhm.
a hospital, right? But if you start talking about, hey, I went to this and I've got 10, 15, $20,000 in bills, then we can also come in and help with negotiations, better payment terms, and trying to get discounts applied. But usually, you have to have at least 10,000 for that to happen for us to be effective.
Okay.
And then, in the case of medical bills where there's coding errors or things of that nature, we could definitely take a look at that. But again, I wouldn't say to actually jump the gun on anything
Mhm.
until you get an actual invoice with a due date on it saying that
Okay.
you owe XYZ.
Right.
Other than that, everything's processing and then it's all up in the air. So
Right.
that's
Plus, there's
really,
negotiation. I mean, what you see initially is not what, they're actually going to be billing out at, correct?
yeah, yes, yes. And so, in the case of like, something billed to your insurance, the name of the game with medical billing, unfortunately, is that the medical billing company for the provider usually overbills
Right.
and the insurance underpays.
Yeah.
And so when
What
that's,
could go wrong with that system?
yeah, where you meet in the middle, unfortunately, and then the patient's left with the bill, and you're like, well, I guess that's, really good, but it could be a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
uh,
It's like managing expectation. I mean, it's like going in and saying, I don't know, Mom, I'm pregnant, and your mother loses her mind, and you go, just kidding, I got a D on a test. But you have, started out with something so huge and outrageous, you've dialed down, the expectation, and your mother's happy with that D that you got on that test.
yeah,
That was
exactly.
a really strange analogy. I'm sorry, but that's
No,
the
no,
way my head works.
I got you. I got you. And so here's the other scenario where a lot of people may find value as a medical bill gurus. As we shift into the age of cash-based medicine, we can tell people which insurance policies they should have if they are going to be paying cash. And so, and I want to say cash again. I'm not talking about a chiropractor or a massage on the street where you're
Yeah,
spending $25, $50. I'm talking about people mortgaging their home and spending 50 grand.
right.
And so when I say this with conviction because I do deal with people who are stage 2, stage 3, stage 4 cancer, Lyme disease, MS, chronic illness, and they're taking I want you to realize every dollar that they could scrape up on this universe from family, friends, mortgaging everything, college funds, 401ks, and then rolling to the dice with cash based medical providers that are
Right.
alternative and integrative in nature. And I want them to know what type of insurance they need to have to even get in the batter's box. And so that's a majority of my business right now is people who are spending literally $100,000 in cash for 3 months of treatment. I mean, that
Mm-hmm.
happens. I get hundreds of phone calls a month for people doing that.
So when it's open season for insurance, is that a good time to call you and kind of go over like,
Any time is a good time to call me.
okay.
Okay. Because my thoughts when it comes to health, and this is just coming from someone who's told doctors to go f themselves with how
Mhm.
they treated my family. I don't ask for permission, I ask for forgiveness. Okay.
Mhm.
And so when you get a stage 3, stage 4 cancer diagnosis, there's no empathy. You think there's
Mhm.
empathy until you see them not pay the bill. Okay. And so the reality here is that I tell people you should know that if you're going to be going down this path, you need to have a PPO. And if it's something that you have to wait for open enrollment, find a qualifying life event. Just do it. Ask the
Mhm.
question, make someone uncomfortable. Say, here's the reality. I have this condition at your HR company. Is there any way to get me on the PPO? Because the treatments I need, I have no chance of getting covered with an HMO.
Mhm.
And make people feel uncomfortable because you're in a certain situation with your health.
And we've been unfortunately forced that when you have chronic illness to go into the cracks and not have a voice and not, not be vocal about things and wait for open enrollment. And I hate telling someone in January to wait till November to check their benefits, right?
Right, right, right.
If someone has a chronic illness, you're basically saying for the next 2% of your life, you've got to suffer before you have a chance to go spend $100,000 on alternative treatments. I mean, that's a miserable feeling,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I like what you said about go find a qualifying life event. And you're talking, I mean, typical qualifying life events where mid-year or midterm you can change your insurance are like death, divorce. What else? Those are the two biggies I
or
think
or
of.
or or, or your partner loses their benefits somehow, quote
Okay,
unquote,
I
and
gotcha.
then when they do that, you have to enroll them, and then when you have to enroll them, it gives you an opportunity to change yours at the same
Change
time.
it. Gotcha.
So
Okay,
there's nothing wrong with getting gangster to protect yourself.
I
That's all I
like
gotta
it.
say.
I like it. And you're talking to the right crew here because we say FUMS every day. So we're a little gangster anyway.
Yeah, that's right.
So, if it's determined that your company can help us, I know this is a weird, loaded question because it's going to be. It all depends, I'm sure. But what's the timeline look like?
So it really depends, right?
Yeah,
So all the pro bono consulting, I do that on the spot. But if you hire medical bill gurus to like look at medical bills, and we don't have to bill anything out, and we have to just provide strategy and make some phone calls, that's like within a week or two, right? But then if you go to a clinic and we actually have to prepare the bills and submit them to the insurance and navigate the system, it takes us 3 to 4 weeks to get everything out the door. In 60 to 90 days for the insurance to make a decision and actually provide reimbursement, or a decision that we
gotcha.
need to submit medical records, recode things, or navigate the system. So it usually is 3 to 4 months. Unfortunately, it's a
Okay,
pretty timely process. So
okay. Is there, speaking of time, is there a time limit on submission of claims that you can help us with?
yeah, so if you go to an in-network medical provider, then
Yeah.
you should not have to worry about that at all because they have to submit things within, like, I think it's 45 days typically per the
Hmm.
contract, and the patient wouldn't have to deal with that. But if they do go to an out of network medical provider where the patient is submitting claims that they paid in cash, then they need to be wary of what's called the out of network timely filing limit, which on average is 12 months. I see them range anywhere from 6 months to 18 months on average, but the main one is usually 12 months.
Okay. But in terms of us now just learning about you, and we're like, damn it, I could have used him on this 2 years ago. Is it too late?
Most likely too late.
Yeah, gotcha. Even if it's in network.
Well, if it's in network, you shouldn't have had to deal with that to begin with, right?
Mm,
And so if it is that point and you are finding issues from 2 years ago, if it's already in collections and you're already on a payment plan and it's like really that past it, it's so much harder to overturn that. I
gotcha.
mean, once you start selling the debt to a collection agency, then we start really going down this slippery slope of where we're not negotiating with the provider anymore. We're negotiating with people who are trying to cut your throat and take your money. You know what I'm saying?
Right, right. Yep, yep,
So,
yep.
I mean, when we talk to them, I mean, good luck trying to get anybody on the phone with a collection agency that's going to not want to do anything other than just like, take your credit card.
Right. Oh boy. Well, this has been really good information, Danielle. I so appreciate you taking the time to answer all my gazillion questions and clarify things a little bit and just be there for people at their most vulnerable time, getting hammered with all this financial bullshit on top of everything else we're dealing with. So, thank you so much for being here and sharing your company's services and everything that you do for everybody every day. If people want to learn more about medical bill gurus or request some help, where can they find you?
Yeah, so the best thing to do is they can give us a call at our 1-800 number, which is 1-800-674-7836, or go to our website, www.medicalbillgurus.com, and just submit a form submission, and then we'll have someone reach out to you. But those are the two main channels. And then if you want to, follow along on the journey, we're big on Instagram at Medical Bill Gurus. I travel. I just hit 60 flights, and I've got another. I've already hit like 10 this year, so I'm trying to hit 100 flights this year of just going around and actually connecting with people on the journey and creating a movement of what it's like to be chronically ill in America, and promoting solutions that aren't just cookie cutter, health care solutions, right? And trying to really promote things. So, feel free to follow along with the movement on our Instagram at Medical Bill Gurus.
Awesome. I really appreciate everything you're doing. Thanks for taking the time to chat with me and share this with the FUMS community. And just want to let everybody know that he just gave us a lot of information, phone numbers and whatnot. That is all in the show notes. So just go to fumsnow.com/podcast, and all of those clickable links will be there for you. Thanks again, Daniel. Really appreciate it.
All right, sounds good. Thank you so much.
Take care. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Daniel. I found it really interesting. If you find value in this podcast, please share it with others who could benefit, and rate and review it on Apple Podcasts if you would, please. I read every single one of them, and it really helps spread the good word of FUMS. Shout out to my awesome podcast editor, Steve Woodward of podcastingeditor.com. If you're interested in starting a pod or just need some help with an existing pod, he's the man. He even writes and records intro and outro music. Did I mention he's awesome? Yeah, he is. Again, find him at podcastingeditor.com. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate you listening to the FUMS podcast show. Be sure to subscribe to it so you won't miss an episode. You can do that right on the website at fumsnow.com. While you're there, sign up for the free email list so you'll be among the first to know of any new findings in MS research, new therapies and products, as well as any blog posts and podcast episodes I release. Want to chat with others in the FUMS community? Join us on Facebook at FUMS Now. Thanks again, and don't forget to talk to the stupid disease as it deserves. Tell it FUMS every day.